Joseph Reid was fascinated by sharks from an early age. He chased great whites as a marine biologist before finding his true calling, swimming amongst another breed of sharks as a patent litigator. The job demanded extensive travel, and Reid spent a lot of time in airports and on airplanes. And it was against this backdrop that Air Marshal Seth Walker was born. Reid poured his travel experiences and his imagination into his debut novel, Takeoff, a blistering tale which grabbed readers from the first page and took them on a turbulent thrill ride. Reid's follow-up, False Horizon, upped the ante as Walker faced off against eco-terrorists, drug smugglers, deranged frackers, and armed miners as he investigated the downing of a commuter plane in Appalachia. His latest novel, Departure, will hit the terminal August 11th, 2020. Well, welcome to the show, Joseph.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Cheers to you.
Toast to your arrival.
Here we go.
You have well over 1 million miles in air travel. In fact, you're semi-famous for the photos you take of the various pieces of art in airports and post on Instagram. So tell us, how did all that travel and airports in particular spark your interest in writing thrillers?
Yeah, so I was writing before I focused on airports and aviation as sort of a base for it. So really, it was so many folks have a dedicated place that they write about. John Sanford in the Twin Cities, Connolly with L.A. And I thought about whether I wanted to do something set here in San Diego, my hometown now. But really for work, for my day job, I spend a ton of time on and around planes and in airports. And so as I started to think about what would be an interesting setting and what would lend itself to a lot of different kinds of stories, aviation really popped out because, so many things these days touch aviation. We were just talking about coronavirus before we started the show. Air travel is sort of the touch point for a lot of people. And so you can tell all kinds of stories, and it makes for an interesting kind of different location, I think.
Really, your aviation becomes a character in and of itself. Really,
That's the hope.
So speaking of your book, so for False Horizon and for Takeoff, they follow Seth Walker, who is a U.S. Air Marshal, and he finds himself neck deep in pretty much impossible situations. So tell us how you crafted the character, and with your airline travel that you talked about before, is it based on anyone in particular you've met, or a combination, or how did you create Seth?
Yeah, it's a mix of things. So I was a Navy brat, and so I definitely wanted to bring sort of that feel to it. I'm a patent lawyer in my day job, and one of the things that's most interesting to me about the engineers and the scientists that I work with is that they see the world in a very different way than I do. Mm-hmm. I was a biologist before I became a lawyer, and so I tend to see things in biological terms, why your brain works the way it does, or something like that. The folks I work with, though, so many of them are electrical engineers. And so, I look at a wall and I just see, something that holds up the ceiling. They see it more as a container for wiring and all the electrical possibilities in there. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to bake that in there too. And so as I started to think about, well, who would be at these aviation locations on a regular basis, and would have a reason to sort of investigate aviation and airplane-based crime, well, that's an air marshal. But then, I wanted to bring some backstory to him, add some depth to him. So I brought in the electrical engineering aspect. He's a former electrical engineer. And that gives him, for lack of a better way of saying, a bit of a MacGyver feel to it. He brings a different perspective to what he does than a lot of the folks around him. And he comes up with, what I like to think are some neat technical solutions to problems that other people might have a different way of solving.
So in False Horizon, Seth finds himself in Appalachian country.
Yes.
And I actually lived there for a while when I was a kid, and I found it kind of a world unto itself. Very unique in every aspect, even more so than New Orleans, that I know pretty well. So, did anything extraordinary grab your attention when you were researching that part of the book?
I mean, a few things. So I lived in West Virginia a little bit when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then one of my best friends growing up is from West Virginia, and then I also have a few law school classmates from there. So, one of the things was coming off Takeoff, which is set in the American Southwest. One of the beauties of Walker being this aviation-based detective is you can set him anywhere. And so I went into the second book really trying to be very deliberate about picking a location and a story that would be very different than what you saw in Takeoff, because I wanted book 2 to be very, to stand alone and sort of show the full breadth of the character and the possibilities of the series. And so, as I thought about what to do, Appalachia jumped out as some place that hasn't been the focus of a lot of thrillers, that has a lot of issues, going on there that I could focus on. And where frankly Seth would feel really out of place, given the sort of urban high-tech world he, plays in on a regular basis. Throwing him out in the woods, like Raylan Givens in Justified, seemed to be a unique thing. And then in terms of trying to do the place accurately, I did go to the particular county, Wetzel County, that I wrote about, because I hadn't spent any time there before myself, and I wanted to try and do that justice. And I did sort of bring in a bunch of what I'll call subject matter experts, folks from West Virginia and in particular that part of the state, to try and make sure that I did it justice, because I think if you're going to write about a place like that, you've got to do your best to try and make it as realistic as possible.
Yeah, those little details in that culture out there, you have to be in there to see it.
Yeah.
Because Deliverance, for those folks who've not lived in West Virginia, probably wasn't too far off from some people that we've seen before growing up.
Well, kind of sticking with that theme, when you are crafting your next story, and I don't know how far you have Seth Walker out in your head, if if you're 5 stories out as far as general ideas or just 1 story out, do you start with a setting and think, what can I build around the setting? Or do you start with a story and say, where the hell would this take place? How do you go from there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to your guys' interview with CJ Box, who I think the world of. His books are great. And one of the things he mentioned to you was that he goes into his books kind of with an issue in mind. I think I do a similar kind of thing. I go in sort of focusing on a bit of technology that I want to explore, and bring to the forefront of the story and figure out how that can play into the mystery and the intrigue. The place does factor in, because like I said, he's a broad enough character and goes enough places that I want to sort of feature the fact that he can be in different locations and all the breadth that brings. And so, the next book, which comes out in August, it's set primarily in San Francisco at SFO, San Francisco's airport. The first half of the book takes place almost exclusively inside SFO.
Wow.
And so again, that seemed to me to be as different as you could get from, Dallas in the Southwest, and then again, Appalachia.
That's kind of fun to be able to have him deal with not only the issue, but the cultural changes as you go from place to place.
Yeah, I love that setting. Like you said, you plop him anywhere. And I think that's brilliant from a standpoint of just progressing, the character's timeline and places he can go.
So in
thanks.
addition,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's awesome. In addition to those challenges you've given him, you've also given him a unique mental handicap, if you will, or mental issue.
Yes.
Can you talk about that? And can you talk
Sure.
about how he copes and actually excels maybe because of it?
Sure. So one of the things I noticed when I was like in college and law school was if I listened to music, it kind of quieted a part of my brain where I would get distracted. and really kind of let me focus in on whatever I was doing. And so I know some people who tend to, listen to music and stuff to help them relax or help them focus. And as I started to explore that, some of the engineers I know who are much smarter than me, they are so smart and have so many extra brain cycles more than I do that they can actually like watch a whole movie and do work at the same time and get something out of both of them. That to me is a little overwhelming, but I started to play with that idea and the idea that Walker is this savantish kind of brilliant person. And so I gave that to him on overdrive. He has to listen to a steady stream of stream of content in his ear. Otherwise, his brain kind of spins out of control. He's got so many things going on in his head at any given time. He needs something to quiet those voices, if you will, so he can focus. And so it's like I read a lot of comic books growing up. And so whenever you give somebody a superpower, it also kind of has to be matched with a weakness. Mm-hmm. And I think that's Walker's weakness is if you deprive him of that, he sort of gets reduced to a drooling mess. Mm-hmm. And it's something he has to be in fear of. It's something he has to pay attention to. And it can creep in at the most inopportune times when it hopefully makes for extra dramatic effect.
Damn, I've got all these problems and I don't have any superpowers. I think I'm getting shortchanged here.
It's also a little bit like I in reading. I have kids, and in reading the Harry Potter series to them, J.K. Rowling does all these tricks to get information to Harry Potter. Right, like he sticks his head in the pensieve and he can see the past. He's got the Marauders map and he knows where people are. Walker, because Walker's so technical, there's a lot of instances where I need him to get up to speed on something, but I don't want to spend the time in a thriller setting having him, sit and read or catch up on a bunch of technology.
Right.
The fact that he can listen in the background and absorb that stuff lets me shortcut some of that research and the natural background he'd need to get up to speed on.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So talking about careers, you
I've had a couple.
Interesting parallel, lawyer and ocean. So you started as a marine biologist, and then you moved on to be a patent lawyer, which is, most people would probably say that's a pretty dramatic shift. So what caused it? What caused that shift in polar opposites, you could say, in some regards?
Yeah, so I grew up always wanting to be a research scientist. I never, harbored any illusions about being a lawyer. And I went through college that way. I got a biology degree. I started my PhD. I came out to California, and that's where I was doing a bunch of my research. And frankly, it was kind of a mercenary decision. There weren't, at that point, there weren't many jobs in science. And the few jobs that there were highly competitive, and there was no guarantee you were going to get them. Mm-hmm. And even if you got them, you ended up sort of hopscotching around, almost like a college football coach or something, where you went from job to job. Hmm. And growing up the way I did on the road, I really had no interest in doing that to my family or my kids. So I was looking for something more stable and something where I knew there were jobs I could get and I could put food on the table. Mm-hmm. And so, lawyer was one of those things I always made the joke about, right? I was like, well, if it all goes to hell, I'll just go be a lawyer. And it sort of did. So I sort of did. And it's, I'm a litigator. So I stand up in court and argue about stuff. It is not as different or as inapplicable as you might think to science. I mean, I do a lot with technology. A lot of it is, still the same research and writing skills that I got when I was in science, just sort of pushed in a different direction. But yeah, they are different. And I do miss science from time to time, and that's why I like technology, and I like sort of working technology into my books where I can.
Yeah.
I guess the minutia part of it would be there, because with marine biologists, you're dealing in such, it's scientific, but very, structured, very factual. And patent lawyer, you're dealing with, like you said, with engineers and stuff. You're dealing, it's not abstract thinking. It's
Right.
very much science-based or fact-based. So that does make sense. So interesting.
Well, as being an attorney, you see kind of the worst of people in a lot of instances when it comes to power and greed and all the things that get people into trouble, And so how does that affect your writing, and how does that help you with, develop that perfect antagonist for that particular book?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that. I know a lot of writers who either are or were lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a couple of things to that. I think, one of it is, we're used to writing a lot, right, and doing some research. And so the idea of sitting down and sort of cranking something out doesn't scare us. I think the litigation process in general is very similar to the process of outlining a book in a lot of different ways. In litigation, we're sort of assembling a case and building a case. And you go out and you'll take 10 depositions, and you might take a 5-minute or 2-minute snippet out of each one, right? And then you've got all these documents, and you're grabbing little snippets out of the documents, and you're building a case. And when you do that, it's really like assembling a mosaic. You've got all these little tiles. And at the end of the case, hopefully when you're talking to the jury, you're giving them the overall picture, and then showing them how each of the little pieces sort of fills in a little hole there. Building a story, building a mystery, I get to start with the finished product, the picture, if you will, and then smash it to pieces, and then scatter all the little breadcrumbs around. But I think I'm used to doing that, or dealing with those little bits and facts from being a litigator.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, I see, I'm a corporate lawyer. I do litigation. A lot of times that takes place between, big corporations and things like that. So I do think I have a personal view on corporate power and how that plays out in modern society. And I think those issues kind of play out in some of the books.
Well, I'm going to kind of stick with that thread about issues and antagonists. So False Horizon deals with eco-terrorists, it deals with frackers, drug smugglers, and a lot more, actually. While entertaining, you are also addressing some of society's ills. Tell us about that balance. How do you manage to advocate for some kind of change in the world through fiction without pontificating or preaching, and keeping it entertaining?
Yeah, going into False Horizon, there were a bunch of threads I knew I wanted to pull on. I wanted to pull on the environmental thread, and fracking. I wanted to pull on the opioid crisis, because we were going to set a book in West Virginia in today's day and age. I don't think you can avoid touching on that.
Which is still 1950.
And then I also want to bring in drones. There's a lot of drones in the book, which you can tell from the cover.
Yeah.
And so I had to figure out a plot to sort of mesh all those things. I hope that by giving the different characters different perspectives and trying to put myself in the head of each character as if, they believe what they believe and they've got good reasons to believe it, that you get to see a full range of perspectives on an issue and have it be complex. I don't think False Horizon comes off as a very one note, I'm either for this thing or against that thing. It was more that there are issues that, I hope people are thinking about and talking about. And, hopefully if you read one of my books, you get a bit of those different perspectives, and it opens up your eyes, even if you and I met on the street, we might have the same or very different political views.
Right.
Hopefully you just, get both sides of that issue through the book and can make your own conclusions about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's difficult to I've had ideas in the past, and I'm mostly speaking of screenplays right now, where I wanted to address an issue, and I've just always found that to be a bit of a conundrum to entertain, to make a point. And sometimes the point is just like you said, to get people to think about something, but even that, to you're walking a line, and I think you do it very well. And I was just curious,
thank you.
what your secret was there.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
We want to know all the secrets, man. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit here. The four of us, Chris has unfortunately had a family situation. He couldn't be with us today, but the four of us here in the Crew Reviews, we met at Thriller Fest last year, and it really changed our lives dramatically in a wonderful way, and kind of unexpectedly as well. And so someone who's still managing two careers like yourself, you've got the attorney side, you've got the literary side, how important it is for you to make the time to go to, say, like a BoucherCon or, one of these other large writing conferences that we're all a part of, as a part of who you are as a writer?
Oh, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. I do have, you're right, I do have a very busy day job, and balancing writing and law, on a daily basis can be really tricky. I went to Thriller Fest, 2 years ago, and it was a really, really terrific experience. I know you guys know Jack Carr. I know you know L.A. Chandler.
Yep.
We were both on a debut panel together because our first books all came out the same year.
Yeah.
And so getting to meet other folks in the profession, both at your level, so as you can compare notes about where you are in your career and what it feels like to just be starting, but then also getting to meet folks who are, who've been there and done that, who are huge successes, and can really give you some perspective on, what this industry is about, and what it takes to have longevity and things like that. All of that's really, really, really invaluable.
Yeah. I was a debut last summer, and it was like my eyes became super wide open.
Yeah.
Speaking of that and talking about the conferences, to kind of follow up on that one, writers wear numerous hats. Like you said, you're a patent lawyer during the day, writer at night, or writer in the morning, whatever time you end up writing. But you also have to not just write, not just have a day job, but you also are now more than ever your own marketing team. Even if you've got a publisher and even if you have a publicist, whatever, you're still expected to go out on social media, and you're expected to sell your product. So how is the sales side of it hard for you? And what have you kind of learned in that process of having to go out there and sell Takeoff and sell False Horizon?
Yeah, it is a bit of a different animal. I to be honest, I was never the guy who could, sell the most rolls of wrapping paper or whatever when you had the school fundraiser as a kid. I was the kid whose parents bought the 2 or 3 rolls just so he wouldn't have 0. So yeah, the sales side of it doesn't come very naturally. The marketing of it, I do have a publicist. I have an editor, obviously, and I think they do their best to try and reinforce to me that, I want to share these stories with people. That's the whole reason you write them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's more of an effort at sharing this thing that you're really proud of, that you hope people will like.
Right.
Rather than sort of a mercenary, I just want to sell as many widgets, as I can.
Yeah.
That's really how it comes about. And so I try and have fun with it. You guys mentioned my Instagram account. Every day I post a different airport art photo from all the different airports I've been in. I do little things like that to try and keep it interesting and try and make it more creative and fun than, people think I'm just out there, trying to get them to buy something.
Or both.
So we've covered your background.
But please buy as many copies as you want.
Yes. We've covered your background in marine biology and as a litigator. You have a Juris Doctor from Notre Dame.
Oh.
Yes.
But it proves the point that you don't need an MFA to write a great book. You simply need a will, a desire, and an idea. Where did that desire start with you? When and where? And tell us about, that whole process of you just becoming a writer.
Oh, sure. I had, all the very typical early rejections and failures and things like that. I was a big reader as a kid. I read a lot of Michael Crichton, a lot of Tom Clancy.
Oh yeah.
A lot of Isaac Asimov.
Oh, I love Isaac Asimov.
And all three of those guys, I think, were really great about integrating technology in with their writing in a way that didn't detract from the story. It made you flip the pages faster, rather than slower. And so, I did a bunch of writing in school. Most of it was argumentative stuff, especially in law school. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I knew I was a good writer. I knew people read my briefs and thought that, the sentences worked together and all that kind of stuff. But I never really put together the idea that I wanted to be a writer per se until my wife and I were on a vacation. She was pregnant with our first child. And so we went away for a couple of weeks, and I just brought a ton of books. And I was a lawyer at that point, and I hadn't read anything in a while. And I sort of dove into these thrillers, and I was, whipping through them in rapid succession. And I kind of had the thought, well, geez, could I actually do this? Could I actually give it a shot and write one of my own? And so, like a lot of people, I think I came back from that trip. I sat down and I just banged my head against the desk for probably 6 months.
Only 6 months?
I had in mind, always at least 6 months. I had in mind a complex Clancy-like spy thriller that took place in 15 time zones, around the world and all stuff. And very rapidly I figured out I just wasn't good enough to write that book. I didn't have the chops and I didn't know how to pace it out. I didn't know where to start, what to include, what not to. And so then I started thinking about, okay, what if I try and do something simpler? Instead of this big complex Brad Thor, around the world kind of thing, what if I do a detective story? And Sanford and guys like that were in the forefront of my mind. A PI trying to solve a singular crime. And then because I'm a huge masochist, I made it difficult, and I set the first couple of books across multiple cities. And so travel got in there because that's what I do. Yeah. And like I said, that's kind of the genesis of Walker. And so Takeoff ended up being the third book I wrote. It was the first book I was able to sell. And, and even that one had, plenty of rejections and stuff behind it before I got my agent and got a deal.
Yeah.
And so, it's been a terrific ride. I certainly learned a lot through all the rejections and all the things that didn't work. One of the common comments I got in my early work, and I think a lot of writers starting out get this, I got the get to the action, right? Like the book starts too slowly. You're starting at the wrong place.
Right.
And so when I sat down to write Takeoff, I had heard that in so many rejection letters or from so many pieces of feedback I'd gotten. I was like, okay, I'm never going to hear that again. They may rip me apart for something else, but I'm starting with a massive gunfight so that no one can complain that chapter 1, nothing happens.
They can't
and let's go from there.
Too much action, man. Slow down.
Well, it's funny. I had a discussion with another author recently, a guy who's doing really well right now. And I gave him my first chapter, and I thought I started the action pretty quick, and right away he's like, take your third paragraph and put it first. That's the one you want to lead with. We're not even halfway down the first page, and he's already telling me I'm going too slow. So
too late.
Anyway, that is definitely the thing that I think the refrain that a lot of us hear is you better grab them really quick.
Yeah, quick, give them that info dump and get right to it, I guess. Yeah. You've got a new book coming out. When's that scheduled?
I do. Walker book 3 called Departure
is
due out August 11th.
Okay.
So still a couple of months away, but
Sure.
I just turned in the proofread edits. The cover is done. And so, yeah, it's just a matter of getting the books out now.
So then you're just done. I mean, that's it. There's no more work to do on that. So without giving us any spoilers,
Yeah.
maybe you can do a little tease for our audience, what they might want to expect from Seth Walker and kind of maybe in the direction you're going to be taking this one.
Sure. Departure is the third book. And so in a lot of ways, the first two books have been building to this book. The first half of it, like I said earlier, is set in inside San Francisco's SFO airport.
Mm-hmm.
An electrical engineer has gone missing, which I think is kind of interesting. The idea of somebody going missing in an airport, which is a locked room with as many video cameras as you can possibly imagine.
True.
And so Walker gets called in to try and figure out what might have happened, where this guy might have gone, and whether he's the victim of foul play or whether he's up to foul play.
Ooh.
And because he's looking for an engineer, that sort of harkens back to things in Walker's past, why he left being an electrical engineer, why he became an air marshal. And the book then alternates back and forth between an old case or an old mystery he solved when he was an engineer, his first case, if you will, and how that one resonates today, and sort of you learn a lot about why he is where he is, and a lot of the questions that people have had about his backstory and things get tied up in this book.
Do you think like TSA gets really anxious every time he shows up at their airport?
Yeah, I always worry TSA is anxious when I show up. I do a bunch of photo reference, and particularly for this book, I took a lot of photos of SFO in places they probably don't want me taking photos in SFO. And so, I'm wandering around the airport taking these pictures, and I was taking one of a door I probably wasn't supposed to take a photo of, and behind me an alarm went off.
Oh,
and I thought, oh God, I'm done. I'm just cooked. I better have bail money or a phone number to get one of my partners on the phone. And it turned out somebody had like come out of security and tried to go back in.
Oh,
and it wasn't about me at all.
You didn't back up over it. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's one of the perils of doing the research for these books.
You kind of stole my last question, because I've actually spent quite a lot of time in San Francisco airport, multiple times, normally a year. And that's what I was going to ask you, is because of basing so much of that story in an airport, clearly you did a lot of research there, and that's, did you take pictures that someone was like, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah, I took the way San Francisco's arranged, right? Its terminals are sort of in a circle. And then they've got these jetways that launch off the circle, right? And you can get to certain parts of it inside security, but not other parts. So some terminals are connected and some aren't. So I had to do it over 2 or 3 trips, and fly different airlines in and out to sort of get access to the whole place. But yeah, no, the idea was, and this is something, my agent, my editor, and I all batted around, was, when was I going to set a book completely in an airport, and what could you do with that? What kind of challenges are there if you're inside a locked room, and can't get out, right? And you get tons of security, and you get everybody watching everything you do. So how can you play with that, and how can foul play sort of pop up?
You could leave a water bottle in your backpack. That usually causes a lot of issues.
Yeah. Or some hand sanitizer.
Yeah. 3.5 ounces. Yes.
Yeah.
Can't find hand sanitizer anymore. What are you talking about?
My wife had to throw away some expensive lotion one time, and I think she's still hot about it. So didn't put anything in her bag at all.
She's a profiled person. Yeah.
Well, Joseph, you have successfally navigated the first portion of the program.
Ooh, congratulations!
Gone through it unscathed.
It gets nasty here.
Very few people go through the next section unscathed.
Okay.
So we're going to do the lightning round, and as if you've seen the show, you know the drill. We're going to ask you some silly questions, and we expect silly.
Sure.
So my first one is, if you owned a super yacht, what would you name it?
The Tiger Shark.
The
Tiger Shark.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense with your background.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, let's stick kind of with that theme. I'll switch my order of my questions. Is it possible that a megalodon exists? Why or why not?
I wish they existed. I don't think there's a chance in heck that they do. I think while we haven't explored the oceans completely, it would be awfully hard for something that big that needs to eat that much to be hiding somewhere that we hadn't seen it.
We probably would have seen it in Sharknado anyway. So,
yeah.
Somebody just posted the other day online that Godzilla was a physical impossibility because of his metabolism and such, and that was depressing too. Kind of ruining all my
childhood movies.
So my last question is: you've traveled a lot.
Yeah.
So, what is the worst smelling airport you've ever been in?
Worst smelling, worst looking, worst everything is probably LaGuardia.
LaGuardia. My New York friends will agree.
Yeah.
Although Newark, they would argue Newark's a close second.
We'll just lump them together.
I mean, the last time I was in LaGuardia, they are literally building a new airport next to the old airport.
Yeah.
And then they're going to just demolish the old airport. And when you have to ride on a bus to the cab stand, and the entire bus ride is a video and audio explaining to you that, you know, despite how bad everything is, that's to make it better. That's probably the worst airport.
Hopefully leave some lime on that foundation and just get rid of the whole thing.
You guys know I do the airport art photos. And so I flew into LaGuardia and I started wandering around looking for something beautiful to take a picture of. And I was literally texting with some friends. I don't know that I can find it.
He ended up in Atlanta.
He got the Starbucks sign, basically.
All right, Eric, you're up.
I am up. So you live somewhere that's definitely highly visited by tourists, we could say. Beautiful place.
Yep.
So my question is, since you live in a tourist area, how many times have you been to SeaWorld and San Diego Zoo?
Good question. A lot is the answer. I have 2 kids. And so when you have kids in San Diego, those are 2 easy places to go and entertain your kids for the day. And both places do passes for locals.
Right.
And so I've been a member at the San Diego Zoo for probably 20 years.
Okay, cool.
And so we do the zoo a lot. We don't do SeaWorld as much anymore after Blackfish and some things like that. But yeah, no, I've been to both of them a lot.
So always funny how many people live in touristy areas and they've never been there. I go out to California a lot, and I've been to Yosemite now 4 or 5 times in the last 4 or 5 years. And people there in my office, I'll say, well, I'm going to go to Yosemite this weekend. And they're like, oh, I've never been. And I'm like, you've lived here for 35 years and you've never been to Yosemite? How is that possible? They're like, it's 2.5 hours away. And I'm like, and it's Yosemite. But so always crazy. Okay. So going back to airline travel, and obviously you spent quite a lot of your probably life in the plane. What is the best meal you ever had at cruising altitude?
Ooh. That's a good one. So I do a lot of trans-Pacific flights to Asia for work. And I'm guessing it would probably be something on Cathay Pacific. Their food's kind of the best. Every now and then you can pull like a real steak, like a real filet mignon. It was probably something like that.
Wow.
Mine was Air France last.
Oh, yeah. Virgin Atlantic I had a pretty good one. That one was good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I said British Air. I on British Airways one time over to Europe, but most of mine's been domestic travel, and
Great peanuts on Southwest. Yeah.
The snack box you get for $6 isn't very good.
Eric loves that Biscoff. He gets the steak night out.
Absolutely.
Scatters it everywhere.
Eat it just like a Seinfeld episode with a fork and a knife. So absolutely. Just like my Snickers. Okay. So my last question.
Yeah.
Based on where you went for your undergraduate. So 25 years later, why do I still dislike Christian Leitner?
I think everybody hates Christian Leitner if you didn't go to Duke.
I was wanting to say dislike instead of hate, but since you said hate, we're going to go with that.
And from everything I've read, several of his teammates hated him too. But going to Duke when I did, it's impossible to hate Christian Leitner. A fantastic basketball player, made a ton of huge shots. You can't see it, but in my office, I have a picture of the shot, which was my freshman year at Duke.
Against Kentucky.
The shot against Kentucky. So I understand why everybody dislikes him, but he's got a special place in my heart.
All right, I'm up. All right, my first question is: was becoming an attorney really just an evolution of your past career studying sharks?
Yeah, that's the joke I always make is I went from one kind of shark to a different kind.
All right.
So yeah, it's one kind of bloodthirsty, cold-blooded animal to another.
And one's a fish. All right. Number 2, and I asked this for a specific reason. Ever accidentally leave an advanced reader's copy in the pocket in the back seat of a plane and almost leave?
No, that's an interesting question.
Last week I almost left an ARC on an airplane.
Oh my gosh.
Finished. Oh, I was so devastated. It was like losing my child in the mall. It was like that kind of heart palpitations. And how was I going to explain it to the guys? Oh, okay. Number 3.
Yeah.
I want to get this straight. So let's say I have a patent claim for a podcast, but I'm very concerned about a few gentlemen stealing my intellectual property. So what are my first steps, and are you available?
Your first step is to get a good lawyer.
Okay.
I am available subject to conflicts.
Okay.
So yeah, no, that's something I and my firm can do.
All right. I'll begin your email soon.
There's 2 kinds of patent lawyers. One kind gets you a patent. Those are called patent prosecutors. Other kinds litigate patents in court. So somebody's stealing your idea and you want to sue them. Okay. That's the kind of law I do most times. Most of what I do is sue people and defend people who are being sued. But I also do some of the patent prosecution stuff too. So I can help with all that.
I will be sending you my retainer. That sounds like a perfect fit.
Okay.
Eric, we better lawyer up.
Absolutely.
Well, Joseph, thanks for being such a good sport during the lightning round.
No, that's great. Those were great questions.
Cool.
We appreciate you coming on the show. We're excited for you for Departure coming out in August. And if you have not picked up False Horizon or Takeoff, pick those up so you're prepared in August. But we want to toast you. Thank you for coming on the Career Reviews.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor. It's a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Take care.
I want to thank Joseph Reid for coming on the Career Reviews tonight, talking about his novels Takeoff and False Horizon and the upcoming Departure. Look for it in August. Until next Monday, thanks for joining us on the Career Reviews. Guys.
Boom. Hits it out of the park. Bang. Just like that.
See ya. Isaac.
This is the outro for Joseph Reid and Sean and his SARS lungs. 3, 2, get.
I want to thank Joseph Reid for coming on the show tonight, talking about his novels Takeoff and False Horizon and the upcoming Departure. Look for it in August. Until then, guys, thanks for coming on.
Sorry, I blew you out.
Were you going to go to Twitter there for a second?
I don't know what
or did Eric have his microphone off again?
No, I don't know what I was doing. All right, here we go.
Boom! He thinks he has it, folks. Here it comes. Take 10.
It's got that Chuck Norris look.
The Love Mode. I loved that show
Oh man,
for no reason whatsoever.
I saw this comedian a long time ago talking about how stupid the show actually was, where it was just basically like the same thing, and you just have guests. He goes, "Hell, you could set that anywhere." And he's like, "Oh, in LA they have these valets that do parking lots." It's like parking lot, exciting.
And then you had Starsky and Hutch. They had their own thing going.
David Soul.
I just want to slide across the hood of a car. That probably took me 50 times before I didn't rack myself to actually do it successfully.